Marika Lederman. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
I think, so we typically start these out by asking the first question would be, tell us about where you're from, where you grew up, and kind of a little bit about your background as a kiddo.
All right, so I am from Dover, Arkansas. I spent a lot of time in Dardanelle, Arkansas. My mom and dad own a canoe, kayak, and raft rental up on Big Piney Creek, and spent a lot of my childhood in that creek. But because they were so busy on the weekends, I spent a lot of time with my great aunt in Dardanelle. She was mayor of Dardanelle, so I got to go to all the chamber meetings and all the, help with all the baseball stuff. And so I grew up as a kid that was around adults more than I was, people my age. So I feel like being in the hospitality industry and then the political side of things, I really was around a lot of adults and got to understand how to communicate with people from all walks of life. So
that's all. I don't know if I should just. I live in Dardanelle. I live outside of Dardanelle, and I love it.
Yes.
I love the community of Dardanelle.
yes.
I like the area in general around here. But as I get to meet, one of the first people I met was Rashad.
Oh, Rashad.
Right. Yes. And
yes.
What a personality. But I love
Yes.
him, and we talked a lot about Dardanelle and kind of the history in the community and whatnot. And I've just kind of fallen in love with it.
Yeah.
I like it a lot.
Yeah, and Rashad was really close to my great aunt, like I said, who was mayor, and I'm hoping that Rashad will fill those shoes one day eventually for Dardanelle, because he's a great community member. And I have a really strong history in Dardanelle. My great grandfather was county judge for 30 years, so there's a lot. So I am from Dover, but I also say that I'm from Dardanelle.
Claim both.
Yeah, I do.
So I know that after high school, you came to Arkansas Tech for college. Tell us about, I don't know, sometimes there's like no decision. I'm Arkansas Tech all the way, and sometimes like, I had some decisions. So maybe talk through a little bit of the decision process for what, from the transition from high school to college, and then what you majored in.
Yeah, so with the college decision, being from Dover, Arkansas Tech was just down the road. Another, connection piece, my uncle worked here, and so my mom and dad went here. They actually met here. My mom always says she was on the dean's list, but not the good dean's list. And my uncle was vice president of academic affairs, and she was actually going to maybe be removed, and so my dad and her pretended to be boyfriend and girlfriend, and so she got to stay. And so she's gonna appreciate me telling that. But yeah, so when I was a student, a high school student, I didn't give myself enough credit probably for the opportunities that I could have taken advantage of. And I feel like I was really involved in high school, and I just wanted to maybe stay in my comfort zone a little bit. And I came here, and Miss Linda Clark, who was the director of academic advising, set me up with a schedule, and she gave me really good times, no 8 o'clock classes. And I just fell in love with the feeling here, and I know that everybody talks about how welcoming this campus is, and it's not something that you can just say and people not feel it. People actually feel it when they come here, because we're big enough but then small enough. And coming from Dover, my graduating class was 78 students, and I was sick to my stomach the first day that I started here. I thought, this is so big, I'm never going to understand what classes are and how to get from point A to point B. But I had such a good support system here already built that it made sense for me to come here on multiple levels. And so I had no clue what I wanted to do at that time. I thought I wanted to teach K through 12, and there was a teacher that was retiring, and I would have graduated with business education, and she was retiring, so I would have come in right when she was retiring. And then I took accounting and realized real quick that was not my path. So I actually, long story short, I changed my major 6 times.
Sure,
I had
okay.
no clue what I wanted to do, and thankfully I had people on campus that were mentors to me, personally but also professionally, that I could go to and kind of understand what occupations were actually connected to jobs. And so I landed in sociology within the behavioral science department, and the faculty were wonderful over there. I actually was a student worker in advising, and that kind of opened my eyes to higher education. I had never considered working in higher ed because it was just a college, you know, that's not what I thought my path was, so that's how I ended up here.
So it's a little similar as, so I started off with civil engineering, and I got to differential equations, and I was not good at differential equations. I got a D, and my advisor was like, we need to have a discussion, because there's harder classes coming up. And it wasn't, for me, it wasn't a matter of not putting in the effort, it was a matter of there's something not connecting. And so I was like, well, what other majors do I want to pursue? And I went through a couple, nonprofit management, ended up, at the time it was called leisure service management. Now it's either rec management or rec administration, because I was working for campus rec at the university. So kind of a similar thing, like I did not find my right place, but something, I want to go back to something else you said too, is having students in different classes here is the environment, the welcoming, the comfort, and whether you're coming from Dover or Paris, Arkansas, or wherever, you hear kind of similar things, like this is a welcoming environment and people can feel comfortable, and I think that's really important. So I'm glad you hit on that too. I was going to ask about how you ended up in advising as a student, like, because something that you and I chatted about a little bit before, it's like, it's not like that's like on the radar to begin with. So how did you find that spot, and how did you get involved with advising?
When I came for my freshman registration appointment, like I said, Miss Linda Clark was over advising, and she kind of treated me like I was a VIP because of my uncle who had worked here. She was actually one of his admins. So I was on her list and came in, and she offered me a job. So I started that spring and worked under Miss Rhonda Rogers, who was our admin, and I miss both of them so much. But they just kind of took me under their wing and got me out across campus, and that is when I fell in love with advising. I kind of, like I said, I wanted to teach, but then I really didn't want to teach high school, K-12. I didn't want to do elementary because it takes a special person. I'm so glad there are people that want to teach little kids, because my heart just, I couldn't take it. I observed and just bless teachers because they don't get paid enough. But, and I knew that before the pandemic, but I sure knew that after the pandemic too. But when I kept working in there, Miss Linda, we had an advisor that was going to go on maternity leave. And I didn't know what kind of jobs to be looking for. And when that opportunity came up, I just took it upon myself to go meet with Miss Linda and say, I'm about to graduate. If I can help you, I would love to, work in advising. And so I pursued my master's. That position didn't work out because of, at the time I didn't understand how employment worked. You just, as a student, you think there's a magic world and it just all works out, and that's not. And so I had applied once I graduated to the registrar's office, and I knew I wanted to work in higher ed at that point. Miss Tammy Weaver took me under her wing, and I worked up front, and she also was an admin to my uncle, so I had that personal connection. And so worked really hard for her, I feel like I made a good name for myself across campus, and then Shauna Donnell hired me in admissions, so I worked up front in admissions for 6 months, answered phones, coded applications, And then Will Cooper, who was an advisor at the time, applied in student affairs, and he got the position. And so at that time, advising fell under academic affairs, and we were able to shift me from admissions to academic advising. And I got 2 days of training, and Miss Linda said, "You go."
Ready to go.
Yeah, and so got to be an advisor, and it just was everything that I wanted it to be. And you know, unless you've worked in advising, you don't understand how mentally taxing it can be, because there are so many little pieces to so many majors, scholarship requirements, GPA requirements. I don't think we give enough credit to, whether it's a professional advisor or faculty advisors, how difficult that is to know all the little pieces. So then Miss Linda retired, and I was one of the senior advisors for a couple of years, and so I applied for at that time it was director of advising, went through the interview process and got hired, and been here ever since.
And here we are.
Yeah.
One of the things you said about advising was, I remember being in an advising training, and they're like, you know, the student should come in ready to go, and you should be 15 minutes with a student.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to look at them like they had 3 heads.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, have you ever done advising?
Yeah.
I spent an hour, sometimes an hour and a half,
Absolutely.
sometimes several times in a
Yes.
semester with a student advising.
Mm-hmm.
And it is, it is taxing. I mean, I can imagine y'all, because y'all got all these programs to cover, but even in one program, you're like, the student's like, well, I want to do X, Y, or Z. You're like, well, maybe we should look at this class, but I don't want an 8 a.m. class. Or,
Yeah.
so like it's like a hard Tetris puzzle,
Yes.
almost. But yeah, 15 minutes, I was like, who does this in 15 minutes?
No, and like I said, if you've never done advising, you can't really wrap your mind around it, because it could be a 2-minute conversation about dropping a class. Yeah, but what's going on in the class, or what's going on in our personal life to get them connected to health and wellness, or tutoring over with Scott Tomlin in the Learning Center. So, you know, I couldn't ever, there was one supervisor that he asked for total of minutes per student, and it's like, I can't answer that for you, because it could be a 2-minute all the way to a 45, sometimes days, you know, you're working on, like, transfer students, and it's a lot.
Yeah, and on one hand, you really love the students that come in prepared, and it authentically would take 5 to 10 minutes, right?
Yes.
You're like, yes, thank you.
Yes.
On the other hand, you know, because we're the institution we are, accessible,
Mhm.
opportunity,
Mhm.
if you have some students that need help,
Absolutely.
and they need hand-holding,
Mhm.
something we said in a different version of, I don't know if it was in one of these podcasts, recordings we were talking about, you teach the students you have, right?
Mhm.
You got these students here, and you're trying to help them be successful. Sometimes it takes a lot.
Yes.
It takes a lot of hand-holding.
Yes.
And they're good kids.
Yes, they are, but I'm seeing that a lot of things have been done for them in K through 12, and, you know, no offense to anybody, but it just, they don't have, sometimes they're not ready, and so we have to be that person that is, you know, and that's what I tell all my students. You have no excuse now, you know where my office is, so if there's anything that you're questioning, or you have a problem with, or you're not going to class, or you come and find me, and come see us. And that's what I hope our office is at the end of the day, even if they're a senior and they don't know where to go for financial aid, or, you know, they got a parking ticket, hopefully they've made a connection with an advisor to come back and ask those questions, a safe space, you know.
And I know all the students that I have, because we used to get students from the advising center, and they always definitely feel that, you know, Kara and I being one of the ones we work with a lot, and
Absolutely.
everybody loves the advising center.
Well, you know, we try. We don't get it right all the time, but we try.
You're never gonna bat 1,000, but I think
No.
y'all are batting very well.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you saying
I was also gonna ask about your graduate degree.
Mhm.
So can you tell me a little bit about your graduate degree, what you did, and why you chose, because you said you knew where you wanted to work in higher
Mhm.
education, but then master's degree followed. So talk us
Mhm.
through that a little bit.
When I was a senior, you know, in my undergrad, I started exploring, you know, job, master's degree. Well, you know, like I said, my aunt, she was a firm believer in education, that nobody can take your education away from you. And I had got married one weekend. The following week I took my finals, and then trying to figure out job, so I decided to go to grad school, and at that time it was college student personnel. That was the degree, and under Dr. Chris Schwa and Dr. Susan Underwood, and they were very helpful. I mean, in higher ed, you find the same kind of personality that everybody just wants to help, and so that was very much true for that program. And how can we get you to be successful? My goal, everybody asks you, what's your 5-10-year goal? My goal was to run the advising center. That was my goal. And I knew Miss Linda was going to be retiring, so I tried to make the networking steps that I needed to show people that I could do it. So I knew I needed to work under Shauna Donald because she was the supervisor in that. So I don't think students they sometimes can take a step back and think, okay, what is my end goal and who do I need to rub shoulders with to get there? And that sounds kind of weird, but it's so important. You never know who your boss is going to be. And I was talking about Rhonda that hired me. I ended up being her supervisor as a student worker for her, So anyways, college student personnel. I knew it would give me the foundation that I needed to be successful in higher ed. It laid out higher ed so well for me. I wish I would have taken 42 assessment classes because I never knew that I would be working in Excel as much as I do, reporting things. So it was just a good program and a good path. The faculty were wonderful. And so I knew if I wanted to be the director that I needed a master's degree. I knew that they were only going to hire me if I had that master's degree. And at the time I was married, I was working full time. I decided to take my time, and I didn't fly through it like some people do. So I do want people to know, just because you can't take full-time classes, it doesn't mean you can't pursue your master's degree. Sure. And it's okay to drop a class if you're too stressed out. We don't have to, we set these sometimes unrealistic goals for ourselves, and we let it take over instead of leaning into what is best for us, and being in that moment of working and being married and trying to figure all of that out. I just took 1 or 2 classes every semester, and I was fortunate enough that the supervisors that I had supported that, so I didn't have to get that master's degree within 2 years. So I took about 3 years to complete it, so it was great. And it's, like I said, it's given me a great foundation of understanding of just a bigger picture of higher education and working with people.
Everybody has a different path.
Yeah.
And something you said about students, like, preparing, something I tell my students a lot is, I think the student mentality is, I'll get my degree and then my professional journey starts. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, that's false. Yeah. Untrue. Yeah. Your professional journey starts the minute you come on campus. Absolutely. And start your degree program. Absolutely. And whether it's networking, mm-hmm. rubbing shoulders, mm-hmm. Volunteering, all kinds of other stuff, it starts now. You're building that reputation and that portfolio mm-hmm. right now. Yes. And Penny said this new crop of students, and then what they're coming in as characteristics, I guess you'd say, is it takes a little bit more of a, you need to do this. Yes. Yes. Get up and get going. Yes, absolutely. Well, and that's the career services piece. So I supervise advising and career services, and I've really, in the last couple of years, that is one thing that I tell students all the time: take advantage of those resources. Whether it's coming to a career fair, yeah, you're a freshman, but just getting used to talking with employers and them seeing. Like, I just had a student that walked in, she did so wonderful just saying, hi, how are you, that I want to hire her as a student worker. I mean, you just never know the impact that you can make on first impressions. And so, yeah, you might be a freshman, but that engineering firm that met you, they're going to remember your name, and when you graduate, you might, get hired. So, career services is a great resource for sure. Yeah, I know we've had them come over and do workshops, and again, some of the things like, I'm not saying you have to be a polished product, but you're going through the mm-hmm. process over and over again. Absolutely. Resume development, whatever it may be. Yeah. So I also want to ask you, so you know, you've got a long history in higher education and a long history in the area, and especially because of your love for advising, I would say, and your experience there. When students are on campus, it's something you kind of alluded to is coming to you for, you know where my office is, come here for what you need. So what we're finding, I don't know if we're finding this, my anecdotal finding is students need more help. As students are navigating this process, is there any advice or thoughts or, you know, anecdotes you would provide to them if a student says, I have a problem with X, Y, or Z, or I don't know how to navigate this or that? What kind of advice or what kind of things would you tell a student as they come into higher education and then start their journey for their degree? I know that's kind of a mess of a question.
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, that's advising. So I would say, even in my experience as an undergrad student, even with the people that I knew on campus, being humble enough to know that I needed tutoring, and it's not a bad thing. Walking in, I mean, it's just like walking into the gym. Nobody wants to walk into the gym, right? It's just like tutoring. You've got to take advantage of the resources that we have on campus and seek them out. Nobody's going to force you to do it in college. I mean, nobody's knocking on your door making sure you're going to class. So using the resources, especially tutoring, if you're struggling, getting involved, obviously, because, you know, the people that you meet here will be in your life for a long time, and no telling where they will end up and where you will end up, so making those connections. I think, and this is something that personally I tell all of my students now, even with parents in the room before they leave my office if they're an incoming freshman, life gets hard at different points for different people. Having coping skills is so important. And as a student, you have access to counseling on campus.
Sure. Yeah.
And you need to take advantage of that and go and learn coping skills. Because like I said, different points for different people. I have a student worker that lost her father from cancer. In my 30s, life got hard, my aunt has dementia. Just being able to cope with hard things, and you have free access to counseling, so there's no reason why you shouldn't go take advantage of that. Absolutely.
Yeah, you know, one of the things, because I had students with some similar things, and it's one of those things like you want to be human and, you know, have some empathy. On the other hand, and not to sound too cold, I'm like, you know, this is life.
Yeah.
And this is, if there's any place to figure it out, it's here and it's now. I'm glad to give you a couple days or an extension on something or another, but life goes on. And no matter, you know, there's certain circumstances where harder things happen, right? Like the loss of a father or mother is a little bit more difficult than a distant cousin or whatnot. But I think it's important, and I think we've done a good, you know, I would say y'all, I think we do a good job in higher ed is kind of having that human element, but at the same time saying, okay, you're right, we needed the coping mechanism, coping skills, because, you know, once you fly the coop, so to speak, this is reality, and things continue to move on. So.
Well, and what type of employees are we putting out in the real world? You know, I mean, it's. I think sometimes with our generation, maybe we do have some unhealthy boundaries with work-life balance, and I'm seeing a shift in that a little bit where the younger generation is good about putting boundaries of, no, I'm not going to work after 5, and, you know, here we are at 10 o'clock at night working on emails. So I commend them for that, but, you know, yes, it's hard when a family pet dies, but you got to get up and get, you know, back into the swing of things. So, but also don't feel stuck. You know, their first semester is a lot. Getting your feet wet and understanding how to balance your studies with maybe work if you're working on campus. And don't feel like a scholarship has you stuck in a class. If we're not doing well, come in and talk about it, because there's usually a way that we can help you, you know, get out of the class and save your scholarship. So.
I feel a little called out on the 10 p.m. email that,
I don't know what you're talking about.
Well, Marika, I really appreciate you coming and joining us today. Thank you so much for all you do for the students, and hopefully get to work together Christy.
Yes, thank you for having me, and thank you for all y'all do. Appreciate you.